Forsyth there. Now we're joined by Sonia Sodha, Chief Leader Writer for The Observer, and Tim Montgomerie, who is the founder of the Conservative Home website. Good morning to both of you. Sonia, gosh, we just heard there, I mean, it just gives a sense, doesn't it, of the massive in-tray that the new Prime Minister and his team have now got to deal with. How do you think they've started? We're, what, 48 hours in almost?
I think, they've made a great start. Obviously, there's only so much you can tell 48 hours in, but I think in the decisions that Starmer's made in his first 48 hours, you can really see that he's going to be a different kind of Prime Minister from what we've seen before. And, there's a couple of things there. So first of all, look at his cabinet, the cabinet he's appointed. That tells us something important. In the vast majority of cases, he's moved across shadow cabinet ministers straight into their government briefs. That really underlines the fact that he's a Prime Minister about stability. He says he really values experience. He's not done chopping and changing for the sake of it. Then when you look at the Minister of State appointments, he's appointed some people from outside the Commons who've got bags of experience. So I'm talking about James Timpson as Prisons Minister. He's a businessman with a track record of using his company to help rehabilitate prisoners. We've got Sir Patrick Vallance, who was the government's chief scientific advisor during the pandemic, incredibly well respected with lots of expertise on science and R&D. And then he's brought back in a minister, the former Home Secretary, Jackie Smith, who's going to be an education minister. So one of the critiques of this cabinet was because Labour's not been in governments for so long, they're quite young and green. Actually, he sought to balance that by bringing in some experience. So I think it bodes very well.
Tim, we'll talk about the Conservatives in a moment. What's your reading of the way Keir Starmer's started, and as Sonia was talking about there, the cabinet and the layers in the cabinet and in the ministerial roles?
Yeah, I think I largely agree with Sonia, actually. Government is hard work. Government is difficult. It's about balancing lots of competing interests. And I think the way Keir Starmer has formed his government, allowing ministers who'd shadowed the post in opposition and therefore were familiar with them to take up their jobs. Hopefully they'll be allowed to stay there for a while. There was too much merry-go-round during the Conservative years, bringing in people who've been ministers before from previous Labour governments. That makes sense, having those wise heads. And as Sonia said, particularly Mr. Timpson, bringing him in to bring a real professional edge to prison reform, getting outsiders in with that kind of experience. It's a good start, and I say that as a Conservative. So, but I do want my country to succeed, and so therefore I want the government to succeed too.
Tim, let's just talk about the Conservatives. I was struck by Tobias Ellwood, who was on Breakfast yesterday, talking about the fact that he doesn't want decisions to be rushed. He wants people to talk about where the Conservatives and really look at their story and what they're there for now. Do you get the sense that there is going to be taking time to really reflect on what went wrong, or are people going to be going right in with, I want to be the next leader, this is where I want the Conservatives to go? How do you think Conservatives are feeling now?
Well, we've just suffered the Conservatives' worst defeat in the post-war period, and we should be reflecting very deeply and for an extended period of time how we managed to so comprehensively lose the British people's trust. And rushing straight into a leadership contest, I think we've got two candidates to today. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Tim, carry on. It was a mistake at our end. We're seeing some pictures of Rishi Sunak as he left Downing Street.
Having two leadership candidates declare already, just 2 days after the general election, seems premature to me. We often have in the Conservative Party almost a messiah complex, seeming to believe that a new leader can solve all of our problems. Actually, we have more profound questions to grapple with, including what does the Conservative Party stand for now? Why is it? We've just been talking about France a few minutes ago in the programme. Britain isn't the only country going through profound political turmoil. It's happening in most Western democracies. And so thinking deeply about what's happening in other countries as well as our own, what the common problems causing this democratic turbulence, that should be where we start, not having another personality contest.
Just get a view from both of you on the way the votes fell on Sunday, Friday, as the result. Sorry, on Thursday, Friday, as they were declared. Sonia, the Daily Mail, I think, or the Mail on Sunday today, talks about it being a loveless landslide. Labour didn't actually particularly increase its share of the vote, much from that catastrophic election in 2019. It was simply first past the post that got them over the line. Do you think there's any appetite, probably not in Labour circles, for a change? Because certainly Reform and the Greens and the Lib Dems might want that.
Yeah, I doubt we're going to be seeing a sort of talk of proportional representation. I mean, the sort of paradigm of electoral reform is that parties are best placed to do it when they've won big majorities, but parties that have won big majorities have done quite well out of our existing electoral system. Little incentive for change. Perhaps if at some point in the future we saw a Labour Liberal Democrat coalition, could be on the cards. But I think too much can be made of the vote share thing. So I do think that it is true that the overwhelming mood in the country was an anti-conservative mood rather than a huge enthusiasm for Labour. That is true to say. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But you can overplay the vote share point because in some ways it's a system working. The Labour vote was very efficient. They got the seats where they needed to. They got the votes where they needed to. They didn't pile up votes in lots of safe areas like Jeremy Corbyn. And when you're going into an election and people, first of all, when there's an anti-conservative sentiment, a lot of people would have voted Lib Dem tactically in seats where they thought the Lib Dems were best placed. And we saw that depresses the Labour vote share. We also saw, I think, people voting for smaller parties, Reform and Green. And that's because we were going into this election pretty much dead cert that Labour were going to win a big majority. So people feel that that it's safe for them to do so. So yes, it was definitely more anti-conservative sentiment, but I don't think we should be making too much of the exact figure on vote share. That said, I think Labour know they've got a job to do in winning the country over, and I think nobody is taking voters for granted in the Labour cabinet.
And Tim, let's just talk about turnout very briefly. Estimated to be the lowest in 20 years. That has to be tackled.
It does. And I think part of the problem is related to what you've just been talking about the low voter share for Labour. I think people know that none of the parties at this last election really levelled with the public, really said, this is what's wrong with the country, and came up with solutions proportionate to those problems. There was a pretense that everything could be fixed with small tweaks here of tax reform. And I think people knew that they were being deceived, really, and they didn't think this election mattered, therefore, as much as it did to political careers. And at some point, we really do need a much more serious conversation about why growth is declining, why our public services are failing. Labour didn't really do that during the election, and it may be a trouble for them ahead because of that, really, because if they do now want to take radical action, I don't think they really have the mandate for that.
Tim, thank you very much indeed. Tim Montgomerie there, founder of Conservative Home, and Sonia Sodha from The Observer. Good to talk to you both again, and thank you both very much indeed.
And of course, there'll be